Alright, so to understand how articles work the way they do, how they create a system in English, we'll have a look at the way they work with proper nouns first, okay? It can be quite confusing for a French native, so make sure you understand the logic. So you're going to observe a few sentences in English and try to induce the rule or the rules of the English language. Okay, so this is called inductive thinking, as you know, and it's a good way for you to understand how this works. All right, so here is a series, sorry, of sentences in English, and try to notice what can become a pattern for the use of the or the zero article in front of a proper noun. So, was President Trump invited to the royal wedding? You mean Meghan and Harry's wedding in England? I don't know, but it surely was the biggest event in the UK. I heard Meghan and Harry spent their honeymoon near Lake Michigan. No, some people say they went to Canada. Knowing Prince Harry, it's probably somewhere original. Could they have gone to the Sahara Desert? Well, it's more likely than southeastern Spain. Actually, the southeast of Spain can be pretty wild. It can't be as wild as climbing Mount Everest. Right. So, what is the pattern here? The pattern, if you observe it closely, is the following. Proper nouns, people or places actually, are self-referential. What does that mean? It means that there's no need to build a reference because the reference is automatic. When you say, I went to Canada, you're not going to ask me, where did you go? I said Canada, so you know what that means. Okay? So, as a rule, proper nouns are preceded by the null article. You don't need to build reference. Okay? The was sometimes used in the sentences below, but you may have noticed that they were used when the head of the noun phrase was a common noun. Let's take a few examples. The UK, for example. The UK is the United Kingdom. I know there are capital letters, but I mean, basically, United Kingdom, kingdom is a common noun, right? When you say southeastern Spain, okay, zero article because southeastern is an adjective in front of the proper noun Spain, but you have to say the southeast of Spain because now the head of your noun phrase is not Spain, it's southeast. Okay? It's the same as if you would say in French l'Espagne du Sud-Est, southeastern Spain, or le Sud-Est de l'Espagne, okay, the southeast of Spain. So this is a rule to remember, but there is more. Let's go again. So you can also say, if you climb Mount Etna, you can see the Mediterranean Sea. The highest place I have ever climbed is the Eiffel Tower. Here, no problem. The rules is followed. Mount Etna, the head of the noun phrase is Etna, not Mount, because Mount is preceding Etna, so zero article. And conversely, the Mediterranean Sea, sea is the head of the noun phrase, and it is a common noun, therefore you have the article the. Same rule with the Eiffel Tower. Yet, look at the next sentences. If you cross the Mediterranean, you will reach the Sahara. What if I cross the Atlantic? Will I arrive directly in New York City? Here you seem to have the in front of a proper noun. Now, if you take a closer look, you may notice that one word has been omitted in each case. The word sea with the Mediterranean, the word desert with the Sahara, and the word ocean with the Atlantic. You imply it. This is called ellipsis, when you willingly omit a word. Okay? So there is one thing you can add to your set of rules, the fact that proper nouns are still always preceded by the noun article, that it's used when the head of the noun phrase is a common noun. Well, this includes cases of ellipsis. So even if the head of the noun phrase has been omitted, the is still used. Okay. Let's complexify things a little. Now, take a look at those sentences. I love spending my summers in the Alps. I went there last summer with the Pitts. Did you know the first two kids were adopted in the Philippines? The three youngest kids look as though they came from the Netherlands, I mean Holland. In these series of sentences, only the word Holland seemed to follow the rule, Holland preceded by the zero article. What about the four others? Well, if you take a closer look, you may notice that they all are plural, okay, which add actually another rule to another, precision to our rules, okay? So, still the same rules, but the is used also when the proper noun is plural, okay? So why is that? Well, Let's try to explain. A proper noun usually refers to a person or an item or a place, okay? But if the item is in fact a set, for example, a range of mountains like the Alps, or a group of islands like the Philippines, or a group of people like a family or a couple, then there is some kind of elaboration. There is no direct link between the item and the noun. The plural is the sign that a set was created, that separate items were seen as belonging to a group. So there's been some sort of linguistic and conceptual work there. And the is the sign of that work. For instance, if you consider the Philippines, you need to consider the entire archipelago with all the islands in it. Same thing with the pits, or I should say ex-pits. When you say the pits, you referred rather, to Brad, Angie, and their 6 kids. Okay, and the is the mark of this mental construction. So you would say that the plural is the sign of linguistic elaboration, and so is the. Okay. So you will be able to practice on eCampus in 2 activities actually, and one of them is going to be a bit more specific about another exception in British English with rivers, okay, that you absolutely need to know as a linguist. Right. So now that we have studied how proper nouns behave, it's time to turn to common nouns and see how the null article works in more details. So this is a very important slide because the 3 articles in English work as a form of system, and each helps build reference in a very specific way. With the null article, no reference is built. With the definite article, on, the reference is in progress but not fully built yet. With the definite article, the reference is complete. So let's focus on the null article. I said that with this article, no reference is being built. What does that mean? Well, that actually 4 reasons why you would not build reference. So we're going to explain them, all of them, and then focus on each one more specifically. The first case we just saw is the case of proper nouns. When you say, I love Brad, no one is going to ask you who you're talking about. They might judge you and ask in disbelief if you really mean Brad Pitt, but the reference is pretty clear to everyone. In case number 2, it's actually quite close. You don't build a reference because some element, usually a number or a code, builds it for you. When you say, I'm in room 12, nobody is going to ask you which room. The room is identified thanks to the number. On the contrary, the 0 article can also be there to tell you that you don't want to identify a referent. When you say, I went to school with Brad, you don't care which school, you're not asking about a particular place. The point is not to identify the school, but to describe an action, which is here studying. Okay? Finally, you don't want to build a reference in the case of generic references. It's actually pretty close to the previous case. When I say I hate dogs, I don't want to identify a dog in particular. I'm talking about the whole species, so I'm not going to build a reference. So we'll see that into more details, but let's focus first on references that are already identified. The same thing here. Read and observe. Harry Potter's train leaves from platform 9¾ Do you have this dress in size 0? Do you have the answer to question 6? I just love the Fiat 500. When I'm older, I'll work for Fiat. Open your books at page 230. The iPhone 7 looks a lot like the iPhone 6. So what do you notice? Well, the examples seem to follow the rule. Platform 9¾ you don't need the article because you know which platform you're talking about. Same with question 6, page 230, or size 0. Okay, the reference is identified thanks to the number. So what about the Fiat 500 or the iPhone 6? Well, take a closer look. Yes, you find out. This is not a common noun, these are proper nouns. Fiat is a brand just like iPhone is. Okay? So here you might want to distinguish between 2 cases and again induce a series of rules. The first thing to remember is that when a common noun is followed by a number, it's going to be preceded by the null article when the number identifies the referent. Example, I'm on flight XZ3265. Okay? But the is used with a proper noun followed by a number when the number identifies the category, and not the referent. For example, the Boeing 747 is a safe aircraft. Okay, so notice the difference between common nouns and proper nouns. Right. Again, you can practice on eCampus. Make sure that you get this right. Let's turn now to the fact that when you don't want to build reference because you're talking about an activity and not the referent itself. This case is limited to very specific situations that we're going to examine now. So let's compare the two sentences. Since his wife left him, Brad has not been going to church. And Brad suddenly realized he had to go back to the church. He had forgotten one of his children there. I'm pretty sure you see the difference between the two sentences. In the first one, Brad has not been going to church. We're not talking about going to a specific church, but believing in God. Okay, so the act of praying, of believing in God, really. So this is an activity here. While in the second sentence, we're actually really concerned about the referent. We want to identify the church. Where is it? One of his children is there. Okay? So in the first case, we're talking about the activity of praying. In the other one, we're really talking about an actual place, an actual referent. All right? So let's try to analyze a form in context. Okay? Here is a quick reminder, of how to analyze a form. So you need to try and use precise vocabulary, and you always need to first describe the form, what type of determiner, what type of noun. So you need to use what we did in the previous chapters, and then you need to explain the choice of article and give counter examples if necessary. And you might also resort to the French if it can help better understand. So I'm going to take an example, and for the sake of this exercise, I'm going to give you an example of analysis. So read the following cartoon. I'm going to concentrate on the following form. This is why I watch television. I'm going to focus on the last noun phrase, television. Okay? So here is how you could have phrased it. Okay? This is an exercise you should really try and do. So if you want to pause the video before I give the correction, please do so. Take the time to write a paragraph following the method and see if it matches what I'm about to say. So here's a possibility of analysis. Television is a singular count noun preceded with the null article. Normally, a singular count noun is preceded with the determiner, but in this case, there is no need to build reference. The point is not to refer to a specific television set, but to describe an activity, which is watching television. If you said, I watch the television, this would suggest that you're actually staring at the TV set, the object. Right. Let's turn now to the final reason why you would use the null article before a count noun, and this is if you are referring to the whole set. Okay? So in that case, indeed, why bother with reference building if you're talking about a whole set? So let me explain. When you do not wish to point to any specific items, why bother to build a reference? The null article is just fine. So that works when the noun phrase refers back to an entire set. When you say Brad loves women, you mean all the women in the world. Okay? It also works actually with subsets, such as women with long hair. It still refers to an entire set, even if it is a bit reduced. It is still not specific, so you will use the null article. This one will be tricky for you, so you need to always ask yourself, are we talking about something specific that I can clearly identify, or are we referring to a whole set or a whole group, even if that group is a little bit reduced in a subset?